Day number 11, the 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge. I'm David Hooper from bigpodcast.com. My job is to help you grow a big audience. What I want to do is help you spread your message. We're going to do that via podcasting. This series of episodes is going to help you clarify your message, improve your delivery, and because of that, make more money. Solo podcasting puts you out front, and it puts your message out front. When you've got a solo podcast, you don't have to worry about sharing the money. You don't have to worry about sharing the decision-making. You can release your episodes when you want, change things up when you want. Don't like your intro? Change it. Don't like your topic? Change it. And these solo podcasting skills that I'm helping you to develop, they will translate elsewhere. Your speaking, your email, everything you do as far as communication, that is going to be helped by your solo podcast. If you haven't heard the intro episode yet, that is what I want you to do first. That explains the what and the why of everything happening here. To get it and all the other days of the 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge, bigpodcast.com/subscribe is where you need to go. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Previously, day number 10, we talked about mentorship. When you share stories about the mentors you have had in your life, the lineage of the people who came before you to help you clarify your message, get focused on your topic, and think the way that you think, that tells people who are listening to you a lot about you. It is a way for them to get connected to who you are and why you feel the way you do. When you know the story behind something, you're more likely to pay attention, and when you understand a message better, you are more likely to take in that message and start using it for yourself. So your listeners, by knowing about your mentors, by knowing where you came from, are more likely to understand your message. I know I've said this a lot, but it's worth repeating. This system that I'm taking you through, days 1 through 30 of the 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge, this builds upon itself. And by the time you get to the end of the 30 days, you're going to be so much better, not only with your delivery, but being able to share these things with your audience in a way that's going to make them really appreciate who you are as a person, but also appreciate that message. They're going to listen to you more. They'll subscribe to you more often. They'll tell their friends about you, have their friends subscribe. So this is a process that I'm working you through. Today, the focus is mistakes, not your mistakes. Well, maybe, if you can add them, because those personal stories are always good. They'll always help you to get listeners attracted to you even more. But specifically what I want you to talk about is the mistakes that you see people who are listening to your podcast making. For example, if you've got a marriage podcast, what marriage mistakes are those people making? Maybe you talk about health and fitness. What health and fitness mistakes are people making when trying to lose weight, when trying to have better cardio health, when trying to have more stamina, to run faster, to run longer? You got a money podcast? What money mistakes are people making? You sharing these mistakes is important for a few reasons. The first is that it shows that you have listeners, social proof. You can give these mistakes as part of a story. I had a listener, and here is a mistake she was making. It shows you have listeners. It shows that you knew the mistake that was happening. And it shows, if you want to tell this story, how that mistake was corrected. That's the other thing that sharing mistakes helps you do. It shows that you have the awareness of an issue, and it can tease a solution. It may also show, if you want to add a personal story, that you have been through this issue. Let me give you an example of how this works. As always, because this podcast is about podcasting, here's an example about podcasting. By the way, I hope you know that I've got a blog. It's called Big Podcast Bulletin, bulletin.bigpodcast.com. I'm going to give you 3 podcasting mistakes. This was from a guest post by Laurel Staples called 3 Mistakes I Made When Starting My First Podcast. See if you can relate to these. 1, spending too much money on podcasting equipment. If you're listening to other podcasters, especially experienced podcasters, a lot of them like to talk about equipment, flashy things they plug in. And I think the reason we do that as podcasters is because it can feel that we are accomplishing something when we purchase something. Consumption equals accomplishment. That's what we think. But not really. And in this article, Laurel talks about spending too much on podcasting equipment and why that actually didn't help her. The second thing she mentioned, thinking if I build it, they will come. Meaning, if I create a podcast, people will automatically start listening to me. That is not the case. You can build it, but you need to do it right. And that's what we're talking about on the 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge, talking about the information that you need to share with people and how to share that information with them. Simply building something doesn't mean anybody will come. And simply building something even right doesn't mean that you won't have to think about marketing your podcast. You do need to think about marketing. But as I've mentioned, having that focused message, the brevity, being able to clearly communicate your message, that alone puts you leaps and bounds above other people who may be spending even more on marketing. So I want to be clear. She's right about this. If I build it, they will come. That's not necessarily correct. It may be correct for some people. However, building it right, then adding just a little bit of marketing is going to be more powerful than all the marketing in the world if you don't build something correctly. The third thing she mentions, relying too heavily on advertising. And that's what I was talking about. If you've got a podcast that wasn't built correctly, it's not structured with a good, clear message, all the advertising in the world's not going to help you. I'm going to have a link to this article in the episode notes. By the way, I'm always looking for great guest writers for this blog. Reach out to me at bigpodcast.com if you're interested. Let me give you those 3 mistakes again. 1, spending too much money on podcasting equipment. 2, thinking if I build it, they will come without thinking about what you are actually building. You've got to build something of quality if you want to attract people. But you also need to think about, what am I going to do in addition to building something to get people to come? It's a 1-2 punch, because that third thing, relying too heavily on advertising, you can't just do that either. You've got to have a combination of great content and also advertising. You can't just have advertising. You can't just have content. Here's the action step for you. I want you to get your pen, get your paper, outline your episode with 3 things. Consider the beginning, the middle, and the end. This is something I've talked about throughout this series. You want to have a linear episode. You need to have an on-ramp, get people to the meat. Then you need to have an off-ramp, leave them with a nice, satisfying feeling like they've gotten an entire experience from your episode, not an incomplete experience, like, and then it just stops. And they're like, what was that? Where was that going? He just stopped right in the middle of it. Don't do that. Give them the intro, tell them why it's important, give them the meat, the mistakes that you see people making, then wrap it up, why that is important, how you can do the opposite of those mistakes. Remember, stories are important, so add stories where you can. Personal stories are best. Went over that earlier. Keep your outline short and tight. Don't overthink it. Hit record, go for it, upload it, and if you want to send it to me, you can do that via bigpodcast.com. I'm happy to look at these, happy to listen to them, see what you're doing, talk to you about how you can do it better. I think we need more solo podcasters. I want to help you do just that. Have a solo podcast, or at least the option of having a solo podcast. That is it for today. Right now, before you hit record to make that episode, I want you to do this. Go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Subscribe to this podcast. I want you to get all 30 days. I want you to get that intro episode so you can understand fully the what and the why of this series. I also don't want you to miss what's coming up. While you are there at bigpodcast.com/subscribe, I want you to get the free podcast toolkit. I've got episode templates, social media templates, things that take care of that marketing for you. Remember, that was podcasting mistake number 2. If you build it, they will come. Not necessarily. I'm going over the content with you here, but I want to help you with the marketing too. And that is available to you free via the toolkit at bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Thank you for listening. I will see you tomorrow on the next episode of the 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge.